The coffee machine hissed like a dying animal, spitting steam into the already suffocating air of Romano's Café. My fingers trembled as I wiped down the marble counter for the third time in 10 minutes, the smell of burnt espresso and vanilla syrup clinging to my worn uniform like a second skin. It was nearly midnight, and the cafe should have been empty, but Mr. Romano insisted we stay open late on Fridays. Something about catching the after-theater crowd that never actually came. I was invisible here, 23 years old, working double shifts to keep the lights on in my studio apartment, and nobody ever looked at me twice. Not the customers who barked their orders without making eye contact. Not Mr. Romano, who hadn't given me a raise in 2 years, and certainly not the kind of man who walked through those doors at 11:47 p.m. He entered like winter itself had taken human form. The bell above the door didn't chime. It whispered, as if afraid to announce him too loudly. I noticed his shoes first, black leather, polished to a mirror shine, the kind that probably cost more than my rent. Then the suit, charcoal gray, tailored so precisely it looked like it had been sewn directly onto his body. But it was the silence that followed him that made my breath catch. The 3 men who came in behind him said nothing, positioned themselves at different points in the cafe with the practiced ease of chess pieces on a board. He moved to the corner booth, the one with the cracked leather seat that Mr. Romano kept saying he'd fix. The lamplight caught his face for just a moment. Sharp jaw, dark hair touched with silver at the temples, eyes that seemed to calculate the value of everything they saw. There was a scar, thin and pale, running from his cheekbone to just below his ear. A souvenir from a life I couldn't begin to imagine. "Coffee," one of the men said to me. Not asked, stated, black, 3 sugars for him. I nodded, my hands somehow steadier now that I had a task. The routine of it calmed me. Grind the beans, tamp the espresso, pour with precision. I could feel their eyes on me, all of them, watching my every movement like I was something that might suddenly become dangerous. It was absurd. I was a waitress who could barely afford to fix the hole in her shoe. When I brought the coffee to his table, he didn't look up. He was reading something on his phone, his jaw tight with concentration or anger, I couldn't tell which. Up close, I could smell his cologne. Cedar and something darker, like smoke from a fire that had burned out long ago. One of his guards took the cup from my trembling hands and placed it in front of him, as if I couldn't be trusted to set it down myself. "Thank you," the man said without looking at me. His voice was quiet, controlled. The kind of voice that never needed to be raised to be obeyed. I retreated to the counter, pretending to organize the pastry display that had been empty since 9 o'clock. The cafe felt smaller with them in it. The walls pressing inward, the air thick with something I couldn't name. Danger, maybe. Or power. The kind that doesn't announce itself with loud voices and threats, but sits quiet and patient, knowing it doesn't need to prove anything. They stayed for 20 minutes. The man in the corner booth made 2 phone calls in a language I didn't recognize. Italian, maybe, or something close to it. His guards stood like statues, their hands never far from their jacket pockets. I wiped down the espresso machine again, rearranged the cups, did anything to keep my hands busy and my eyes down. Then the door opened again. 2 men this time, younger, wearing leather jackets that looked expensive but not tailored. One of them had a tattoo creeping up his neck, a snake, coiled and ready to strike. They saw the man in the corner booth immediately, and something shifted in the air. The temperature dropped. The fluorescent lights seemed to flicker. "Falcone," the one with the tattoo said, and the name landed in the cafe like a stone thrown through glass. The man in the booth, Falcone, set down his coffee with careful precision. "You shouldn't be here, Marco. You shouldn't have killed my brother. Everything happened in fragments after that." The guard nearest to me moved, his jacket opening just enough for me to see the gun holstered at his side. Falcone remained perfectly still, but his eyes went cold, empty, like looking into a well with no bottom. Marco's hand went to his own jacket, and I saw it. The glint of metal, the intention written across his face as clearly as words on a page. I didn't think. I didn't plan. My body moved before my brain could catch up. The coffee pot was still half full, sitting on the warmer beside me. I grabbed it and threw it. Not at Marco, I wasn't that stupid or that brave, but at the light switch near the door, the one that controlled the overhead fluorescence. The pot shattered against the wall, glass exploding, hot coffee spraying across the switch panel. Sparks flew. The lights died. Darkness swallowed the cafe whole. Gunshots. 2 of them, deafening in the enclosed space, the muzzle flash illuminating everything in strobe light snapshots. Screaming. Mine, I think, though I couldn't be sure. The sound of bodies hitting the floor. More shouting in that language I didn't understand. My legs gave out, and I dropped behind the counter, my hands pressed over my ears, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. Then silence. Heavy, absolute, broken only by my own ragged breathing. "Lights," someone said. Falcone's voice, still calm, still controlled. A flashlight clicked on, then another. I stayed behind the counter, pressed against the cabinet that held the extra napkins. Tasting copper and fear, footsteps approached. I squeezed my eyes shut like a child who believes that if she can't see the monster can't see her. "You can come out." Falcone's voice, closer now. Right on the other side of the counter. "It's over." I didn't move. Couldn't move. My entire body had locked up, frozen in some primal response that evolution had gifted me, and that I'd never had to use until this moment. "She saved your life, sir," a different voice. One of the guards. "She killed the lights before Marco could get a clear shot." Silence. Long enough that I started to wonder if they'd left, if I'd imagined the whole thing, if I could just stay here forever behind this counter and never have to face what had happened. "Where is she?" Behind the counter. Footsteps. I opened my eyes and he was there, crouched down to my level, his face illuminated by the phone one of his guards held. Up close, I could see everything I'd missed before, the weariness around his eyes, the silver in his stubble, the way his tie had been loosened just slightly. The only imperfection in his otherwise immaculate appearance. "What's your name?" he asked. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I had to try twice before I could manage a whisper. "Sophia. Sophia." He said it carefully, like he was testing the weight of it. "Do you know who I am?" I shook my head, even though I did now. Falcone. A name I'd heard whispered in my neighborhood, always with a mixture of fear and respect. A name that meant power, violence, control. A name that people were careful never to say too loudly. "Good." He stood, offering me his hand. "Can you stand?" I stared at his hand for a long moment. It was broad, scarred across the knuckles, a gold ring on his right hand that caught the light. Everything in me screamed to refuse, to stay here in my small safe space behind the counter. But I took his hand anyway. His grip was firm, steady, and warm. He pulled me to my feet with surprising gentleness, his other hand coming to my elbow to steady me when my legs wobbled. I was shaking so hard my teeth chattered. The cafe looked like a war zone in the dim light of the phones. The 2 men who'd come for Falcone were on the ground, unconscious or dead. I couldn't tell, and didn't want to know. One of the guards was bleeding from his shoulder, but seemed unconcerned about it, already on his phone making calls in that same foreign language. Coffee and broken glass covered the floor, glittering like diamonds in the artificial light. "Is anyone else here?" Falcone asked, his hand still on my elbow. "No, just me." "Mr. Romano left at 11. I was supposed to close up." "Good." He looked at one of his guards. "Clean this. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong." The girl was in the bathroom, heard nothing, saw nothing. The guard nodded. "Wait," I said, finding my voice finally. "I can't. Mr. Romano will... Your employer will be compensated for the damage." Falcone's eyes met mine, and I saw something in them that made my stomach drop. Not gratitude, not kindness. Something more complicated and infinitely more dangerous. "You need to forget everything you saw here tonight." "I didn't see anything," I said automatically, the survival instinct that had been bred into me on these streets finally kicking in. "I was in the bathroom. I heard gunshots. I stayed hidden until it was quiet." "Smart girl." His hand was still on my elbow, warm through the thin fabric of my uniform. But quick thinking in the moment, that was very stupid. You could have been killed. So could you. The words were out before I could stop them. His eyebrows rose slightly, the first real expression I'd seen on his face. One of the guards made a sound that might have been a laugh quickly suppressed. "Yes," Falcone said quietly. "I could have been." He let go of my elbow and I immediately felt colder. He reached into his jacket. I flinched before I could stop myself and pulled out a card. Plain white, heavy stock, nothing but a phone number embossed on it in gold. If anyone asks you questions. If anyone bothers you, if you need anything. He pressed the card into my palm, closing my fingers around it. "Call this number." "I don't understand." "You don't need to." He stepped back, already turning away, his guards moving to flank him. "Go home, Sophia. Lock your doors." Forget this happened. They were at the door when something made me call out. "Why did they want to kill you?" He paused, silhouetted against the darkness of the street beyond. For a moment I didn't think he'd answer. Then without turning around, "Because I killed their brother. He betrayed me, stole from me, put people I care about in danger." A pause. "In my world, there are consequences for betrayal. That's not justice," I whispered. "No." He looked back over his shoulder, his face half in shadow. "It's survival." Then he was gone, and I was alone in the dark cafe with nothing but a white card and the smell of gunpowder and spilled coffee. My legs gave out again, and I sank to the floor, the card clutched so tight in my hand that the edges cut into my palm. I sat there until the sun started to rise, painting the cafe in shades of gold and amber. When Mr. Romano arrived at 6 a.m., he found me behind the counter, the cafe inexplicably wrecked and my story already memorized. I'd been in the bathroom. I'd heard gunshots. I'd hidden until dawn. I'd seen nothing. I knew nothing. He believed me because I was invisible. Because waitresses like me were always invisible. But I could still feel the warmth of Falcone's hand on my elbow, could still see those cold, calculating eyes that had looked at me like I was something more than furniture for just a moment. And in my pocket, I had a card with a phone number I knew I should throw away. I knew I should forget. But something told me, some instinct deeper than logic, that my life had just divided into two parts. Before Falcone, and everything that would come after. I just didn't know yet how much after would cost me. 3 days passed before I saw him again. 3 days of jumping at shadows, of checking over my shoulder every time I walked home from the cafe, of lying awake in my cramped studio apartment listening to sirens and wondering if they were coming for me. The card stayed in my pocket, growing soft and worn from my nervous habit of touching it, confirming it was still there. I hadn't called the number. I wouldn't call the number. I just couldn't seem to throw it away. Mr. Romano had been surprisingly calm about the robbery. The insurance would cover it, he said, smoking his third cigarette of the morning while surveying the damage. The police had asked me questions. Routine, bored, already filling out forms before I'd finished speaking. They didn't care about another cafe robbery in this neighborhood. I stuck to my story. Bathroom. Gunshots. Hiding. Nothing. They believed me because I was nobody. By Wednesday, I'd almost convinced myself it had been a nightmare, a hallucination brought on by too many double shifts and too little sleep. But then I'd touch the card in my pocket and feel the heavy weight of that embossed number, and I'd know it had been real. The cafe had reopened Tuesday afternoon with new lights and a fresh coat of paint over the bullet holes in the wall. Mr. Romano hired another waitress, a girl named Maria, who chewed gum too loudly and complained about the tips. I was grateful for her presence. It meant I wasn't alone during the late shifts anymore. Wednesday night, 11:30 p.m. Maria had already left, claiming a headache that we both knew was an excuse to meet her boyfriend. I was wiping down tables, counting down the minutes until I could lock up and walk the 6 blocks home through streets that suddenly felt full of watching eyes. The bell above the door chimed. I turned, already forming my apology about being closed, and the words died in my throat. Falcone stood in the doorway, alone this time. No guards flanking him, no army of silent men in expensive suits. Just him, in a black coat that made him look like he'd stepped out of some old film noir, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. "We're closed," I managed to say, though my voice came out smaller than I'd intended. "I know." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The lock clicked. My heart jumped into my throat. "I wanted to talk to you." "About what?" "About Friday night." He moved further into the cafe, his footsteps silent on the newly cleaned floor. "You kept your word. The police report says you saw nothing." "I didn't see anything," I said automatically, the lie smooth now from repetition. "Sophia." The way he said my name made something flutter in my chest. "You don't need to pretend with me. I know what you did. What you saw." I set down my cleaning cloth, my hands needing something to do. "Then you know I won't talk about it. I'm not stupid. I know how this works." "How does this work?" He stopped at the counter, standing exactly where he'd stood 3 nights ago. In the warm light of the cafe, without the shadows and the guns and the fear, I could see him more clearly. He was probably in his early 40s, with the kind of face that had been handsome once and had aged into something more severe, more dangerous. There were lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled sometimes, though I couldn't imagine it. The scar on his cheek was a pale slash against his olive skin. "People like you don't talk to people like me unless they want something or they're tying up loose ends," I said, surprised by my own boldness. Maybe exhaustion had made me stupid. "So which is it?" His lips twitched, almost a smile. "You're smarter than you pretend to be. I'm a waitress in a cafe that gets robbed every few months. You learn to read people or you don't survive. Is that what you think Friday night was? A robbery?" "The police report says it was. And you always believe what the police say?" I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "I live 6 blocks from here in a building where the heat doesn't work and the landlord won't fix the locks. No, I don't believe what the police say." This time he did smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Sit down, Sophia. I need to finish closing. Sit down." Not a request. Not quite an order. Something in between that made my legs move before my brain agreed to it. I sat at one of the tables, the same one where Mrs. Chen always ordered her morning cappuccino. Falcone sat across from me, and the cafe suddenly felt impossibly small. He smelled like expensive cologne and cold night air, and I realized I was still in my coffee-stained uniform, my hair falling out of its bun, probably looking exactly like what I was, exhausted, poor, invisible. "You saved my life," he said simply. I threw a coffee pot at a light switch. I was scared. It was instinct. Instinct is what keeps people alive in my world. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with those calculating eyes. Most people would have hidden, or screamed, or frozen. You acted. I'm regretting that now. Are you? His head tilted slightly. You could have called the number on the card. Asked for money, protection, a job. Anything. You didn't. The card felt like it was burning in my pocket. "I don't want anything from you. Everyone wants something, Sophia." "Then I guess I'm not everyone." Silence stretched between us, taut as a wire. Outside, a car alarm went off, then stopped abruptly. The coffee machine hummed in the background, the only sound in the empty cafe. "The men who came for me on Friday," Falcone said finally. "Their brother worked for me. He stole a significant amount of money and gave information to a rival family. Information that got 3 of my men killed." "So you killed him?" I said flatly. "Yes." No hesitation, no justification. Just yes. "And now his brothers are dead too," I continued. "Yes. Because of me." The realization hit me like cold water. "They're dead because I killed the lights, and you... They're dead because they tried to kill me in a public place and failed," Falcone interrupted, his voice sharp. "Because they were sloppy and emotional and thought revenge was more important than survival. You didn't kill them, Sophia. Their own stupidity did." I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the warmth of the cafe. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know the truth. And because..." He paused, and for the first time I saw something like uncertainty cross his face. "Because I need to know if anyone has approached you, asked questions, followed you." Fear spiked through me. "No. Why would they?" "Because someone might have seen you that night. Because in my world, Witnesses are liabilities. His eyes locked on mine. I've had people watching you, making sure you're safe. You've had people watching me? My voice rose, anger cutting through the fear. You've been following me? Protecting you, he corrected. There's a difference. Not from where I'm sitting. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. I don't need your protection. I need you to leave me alone. I kept your secret. I didn't tell anyone anything. Just forget I exist. I can't do that. Why not? He stood too, and suddenly the table between us felt inadequate, too small a barrier. Because you're in danger whether you realize it or not. Because Marco and his brother weren't working alone. Because there are people who will want to know what happened that night and you're the only witness. I didn't see anything, I said desperately. I was in the bathroom. Stop. He moved around the table, closing the distance between us. I backed up instinctively until I hit the counter. He stopped a few feet away, but his presence filled the space, suffocating and inescapable. You're not invisible anymore, Sophia. You stopped being invisible the moment you threw that coffee pot. In my world, that makes you either an asset or a target. I don't want to be either of those things. What you want stopped mattering on Friday night. His voice softened slightly, though his eyes remained hard. I'm sorry. I truly am. But this is the reality now. My hands gripped the counter behind me. So what happens now? You make me disappear? Add me to the list of people who know too much? No. He reached into his coat. I flinched again, hating myself for it, and pulled out an envelope. Now I make sure you're protected. There's $20,000 in here. Enough to move somewhere safe. Change your name if you want. Start over. I stared at the envelope like it was a snake. I don't want your money. It's not about what you want. It's about keeping you alive. By making me run, hide, spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, better than not having a life at all. I laughed, a hysterical edge to it. This is insane. I'm a waitress. I serve coffee and smile at people who don't tip. I don't belong in your world. You're in it now whether you belong or not. He set the envelope on the counter beside me. Take the money. Disappear for a while. I'll let you know when it's safe. And if I don't, his jaw tightened, then I'll have no choice but to keep you close, where I can protect you properly. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implications I didn't want to examine. That sounds like a threat. It's a promise. He buttoned his coat, preparing to leave. I don't make threats, Sophia. I make statements of fact. You have until tomorrow night to decide. Take the money and disappear, or what? I challenged, that stupid boldness rising up again. You kidnap me? Lock me up somewhere? Or I keep you where I know you're safe, where no one can touch you without going through me first. His eyes met mine, and I saw something in them that made my breath catch. Not cruelty, not even anger. Something almost like regret. I don't want to do that, but I will if I have to. You don't even know me. I know you were brave enough to act when it mattered. I know you've kept your word even though you're terrified. I know you work double shifts in a cafe that pays you barely enough to survive and you never complain. He moved toward the door. I know more about you than you think, Sophia. That should have scared me. It did scare me. But it also sent a strange warmth through my chest that I absolutely did not want to examine. Tomorrow night, he repeated. Decide. And if someone comes for me before then? He turned back, and the look on his face made every hair on my body stand up. It was the same cold, empty look I'd seen on Friday night, right before the shooting. Then I'll kill them. All of them. And anyone who sent them. He said it so simply, like he was describing what he'd had for breakfast. Like violence was just another Tuesday for him. You're a monster, I whispered. Yes, he agreed without hesitation. But I'm a monster who keeps his promises. Think about that while you're deciding. Then he was gone, the bell chiming cheerfully as the door closed behind him, leaving me alone with an envelope full of blood money and a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. I stayed there until my shift ended at midnight, staring at that envelope like it might explode. I didn't touch it, didn't count it, didn't even move it. When I finally locked up and left, I walked home through those dangerous 6 blocks and felt eyes watching me from every shadow. His eyes. His men's eyes. Maybe other eyes too, belonging to people who wanted me dead for what I knew. In my apartment, I stood at the window looking down at the street below. A black car was parked across from my building, expensive and out of place in this neighborhood. As I watched, a man got out, lit a cigarette, and leaned against the hood. Even from 4 floors up, I could tell he was armed. Protection, Falcone had called it. A cage, I thought. But maybe a cage was better than being dead. I pulled the card from my pocket, that soft white rectangle with its gold embossed number, and I finally admitted what I'd known since Friday night. My life as I'd known it was over. The invisibility I'd relied on for survival had been stripped away. Now I had to decide what came next. Run and spend my life hiding, or walk willingly into the dark with a man who killed without hesitation and called it survival. Neither option felt like a choice. Both felt like different versions of the same prison. Outside, the man finished his cigarette and got back in the car. He didn't drive away. He was settling in for a long wait, I realized. Watching. Protecting. Imprisoning. I closed the curtains and sat on my narrow bed, still in my uniform, smelling of coffee and fear, and wondered if Falcone was right, if what I wanted had stopped mattering the moment I'd thrown that coffee pot. If I'd saved his life only to lose my own. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the building, every siren in the distance, every footstep in the hallway made me bolt upright, my heart racing. The envelope from the cafe sat on my tiny kitchen counter. I'd gone back for it before leaving. Some instinct telling me that leaving $20,000 unattended was stupid regardless of how tainted the money was. Now it mocked me from across the room, a white rectangle full of impossible choices. By the time dawn broke, painting my apartment in shades of gray and gold, I'd made my decision. Or rather, the decision had made itself. I couldn't run. Where would I go? I had no family, no friends outside this neighborhood, no skills beyond making coffee and reading people's moods. $20,000 might seem like a fortune, but how long would it last? 6 months? A year? And then what? I'd be broken alone in a strange city, still looking over my shoulder, still waiting for the past to catch up with me. At least here, I knew the rules. I knew which streets to avoid, which cops could be trusted, which bodega owners would look the other way when necessary. Here, I had Mr. Romano, and the cafe, and the comfortable invisibility of routine. Except I wasn't invisible anymore. I called in sick to work, the first time in 2 years. Mr. Romano sounded annoyed but didn't argue. Maybe he sensed something in my voice. Maybe he knew more than he'd let on about Friday night. In this neighborhood, everyone knew more than they said. At noon, I picked up my phone and stared at that gold-embossed number. My finger hovered over the digits for a full minute before I finally forced myself to dial. It rang once. Sophia. Not a question. He'd been waiting for my call. How did you know it was me? I know everything that concerns me. A pause. Have you decided? I wrapped my free arm around myself. Suddenly cold despite the weak sunlight streaming through my window. I can't run. I have nowhere to go. Silence on the other end, long enough that I started to wonder if he'd hung up. Then, that's not the only reason. He was right, though I didn't want to admit it. Part of me, some reckless, self-destructive part, was curious about him, about his world, about what it would mean to be protected by someone who treated violence like arithmetic, curious about the way he'd looked at me in the cafe, like I was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "Where are you?" he asked. "Home. Pack a bag, clothes for a week, anything you can't replace." My stomach dropped. "What? No, I just meant you said you can't run. That means you're accepting my protection, which means you're coming with me." His tone left no room for argument. "Someone will be there in 30 minutes. Wait. Falcone. I didn't agree to. You called me. That was your agreement." A softness entered his voice, unexpected and somehow more terrifying than the coldness. "I told you, Sophia. I keep my promises. I said I'd protect you if you stayed. And I will." But I can't do that if you're living alone in an apartment with broken locks 6 blocks from where someone tried to kill me. So you're kidnapping me. I'm keeping you alive. A pause. There's a difference. Not from where I'm standing. Then sit down. I could hear the slight smile in his voice. 30 minutes. Pack light. He hung up before I could argue further. I stood there holding my phone, my mind racing through possibilities. I could refuse to go. Could pack a bag and take the money and disappear before his people arrived. Could call the police and tell them everything, and hope they'd protect me instead of throw me in jail for aiding and abetting. But I'd already made my choice when I dialed that number. Everything after was just momentum. 28 minutes later, I had a duffel bag packed with clothes, toiletries, and the photo of my mother that was the only thing I owned worth keeping. She'd died when I was 16, and the picture showed her laughing at something off camera, young and beautiful and alive. I'd become a waitress, because it was the first job I could get after aging out of foster care. Invisibility had been survival then, too. The knock on my door came exactly 30 minutes after Falcone's call. I opened it to find a woman standing in the hallway. She was about 40, with short dark hair and eyes that swept over me with professional assessment. She wore jeans and a leather jacket, but something about the way she stood, weight balanced, hands loose at her sides, told me she was more than she appeared. "Sophia, I'm Elena. Mr. Falcone sent me." Her voice was warm, almost friendly, but her eyes remained alert, scanning the hallway behind her. "Are you ready?" "Do I have a choice?" A smile flickered across her face. "There's always a choice, but some choices are smarter than others." I grabbed my bag and followed her down the stairs. The black car from last night was parked out front, a different man behind the wheel. Elena opened the back door for me, and I slid in, my bag clutched on my lap like a shield. The interior smelled like leather and that same expensive cologne Falcone wore. Elena got in beside me, and the car pulled smoothly into traffic. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Somewhere safe." That's not an answer. Elena turned to look at me, and something like sympathy crossed her face. "Mr. Falcone owns several properties. You'll be staying at one of them until the current situation is resolved." "What situation?" "The one where people might want to kill you for witnessing something you shouldn't have." She said it so matter-of-factly that I almost laughed. "Don't worry. The house is comfortable. You'll have everything you need. Except freedom. Freedom is overrated when you're dead." I couldn't argue with that logic, so I stayed silent, watching the city slide past the tinted windows. We drove for almost an hour, leaving behind the familiar streets of my neighborhood for areas I'd only seen in movies, tree-lined avenues with historic brownstones, parks with actual grass, restaurants with white tablecloths visible through pristine windows. This was a different New York, one where people like me were only visible when we served their coffee or cleaned their homes. The car finally pulled up to a gated property in what Elena informed me was the Upper East Side. The gates opened automatically, and we drove up a circular driveway to a 4-story brownstone that probably cost more than I'd earn in 10 lifetimes. My hands were sweating on the handle of my duffel bag. "Come on," Elena said gently. "It's not as intimidating as it looks." She was wrong. It was more intimidating. The interior was all dark wood and cream-colored walls, abstract art that probably cost a fortune, furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. A massive staircase curved up to the second floor, and through an archway I could see a living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a private garden. "Mr. Falcone will be here this evening," Elena said, leading me up the stairs. "Until then, make yourself comfortable. Your room is on the 3rd floor." And my room turned out to be larger than my entire apartment. A king-sized bed dominated the space, covered in white linens that looked like they'd never been slept in. There was a sitting area with a velvet couch, a desk by the window, and a bathroom with a clawfoot tub and heated floors. Fresh flowers sat on the dresser. White roses, their scent filling the air. "There are clothes in the closet," Elena said, opening the door to reveal more garments than I'd owned in my entire life. "Mr. Falcone had them brought in this morning. If anything doesn't fit, let me know, and I'll have it adjusted." I stared at the clothes, designer labels I recognized from magazine ads, fabrics that looked impossibly soft, colors ranging from black to cream to deep burgundy. He bought me clothes? He wanted you to be comfortable. He's keeping me prisoner in a golden cage and bought me designer clothes to make it pretty, I said flatly. Elena's expression softened. I know this is frightening, but Mr. Falcone doesn't do this lightly. If he's gone to this length to protect you, it means the danger is real, or it means he's obsessed with control. That too, she admitted with a slight smile. But in this case, both things are true. You saved his life. In his world, that creates a debt. And Mr. Falcone always pays his debts. She left me alone after that, promising to bring lunch in an hour. I sat on the edge of the massive bed, my cheap duffel bag looking pathetic against the expensive linens, and tried to process what my life had become in the span of 5 days. I'd gone from invisible waitress to... what? Protected witness? Kept woman? Prisoner? The afternoon crawled by. I showered in that enormous bathroom, using products that probably cost more than my weekly paycheck. I tried on some of the clothes, a soft cashmere sweater, dark jeans that fit perfectly, leather boots that made no sound on the hardwood floors. Everything was my size, everything was my style, or what my style would be if I could afford to have one. It should have been creepy. It was creepy. But it also felt like being seen for the first time in my life. Elena brought lunch, fresh pasta, salad, bread that was still warm, and ate with me in the sitting area, telling me about the house, the security system, the rules. I could go anywhere on the property, but the gates were locked and monitored. I couldn't leave without an escort. I couldn't contact anyone from my old life without clearing it first. For my safety, she kept saying, to keep me protected. Every rule was another bar on my cage. As the sun started to set, painting the room in shades of orange and gold, I heard a car in the driveway. My heart immediately started racing. That Pavlovian response I'd developed to the sound of expensive engines. I moved to the window and watched as Falcone emerged from a black SUV, flanked by 2 guards. He looked up, directly at my window, as if he'd known I'd be watching, and even from 3 stories up I could feel the weight of his gaze. He was here. And suddenly the room felt smaller, the air thicker, my carefully constructed calm evaporating like morning fog. I heard footsteps on the stairs, voices in the hallway, then a knock on my door, firm, but not aggressive. "Come in," I said, hating how my voice shook. Falcone entered, and the room transformed around him. He'd changed from his suit into dark slacks and a black sweater that made him look younger, less formal, though no less dangerous. His hair was slightly damp, like he'd showered recently. Without the armor of his expensive suits, I could see the breadth of his shoulders, the way he moved with contained power, like a predator pretending to be domesticated. "How are you settling in?" he asked, closing the door behind him. "I'm a prisoner in a mansion. How do you think I'm settling in?" He smiled, a real smile this time that reached his eyes and made him look almost human. "Fair enough." He moved to the sitting area, settling into one of the chairs and gesturing for me to take the couch. "Sit. Please, I'd like to talk." I sat, leaving as much distance between us as the furniture allowed. "About what?" "About why you're really here." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his full attention focused on me in a way that made me feel stripped bare. "You said you couldn't run, but I don't think that's the whole truth." "What do you want me to say? That I was curious? That some stupid part of me wanted to see your world?" I laughed bitterly. "Fine. You're right. I called you because I'm an idiot who doesn't know when to stay safe." "No," he said quietly. "You called because you're brave, because you understand, even if you don't want to admit it, that safety is an illusion, that the only real protection comes from proximity to power." That's a convenient philosophy for someone who has all the power. I didn't always have it. Something flickered in his eyes, memory, maybe, or old pain. I grew up 6 blocks from your apartment. Different building, same world. I know what invisibility looks like, Sophia. I know what it costs. I stared at him, searching for the lie. But his face was open, more honest than I'd seen it. Then why stay in that world? Why become this? Because invisible people don't survive. They just exist until someone notices them and decides they're in the way. He stood, moving to the window, his back to me. I decided a long time ago that I'd rather be feared than forgotten. That I'd rather have power than be powerless. And look where it got you. People trying to kill you in cafes. Yes. He turned back to face me, but I'm still alive, and so are the people I care about. Can you say the same about your invisibility? Has it protected you, or has it just made you easy to ignore? The words hit harder than I wanted to admit. How many times had I been overlooked, dismissed, treated like furniture? How many times had I swallowed my anger and my pride because speaking up would make me visible in all the wrong ways? This isn't freedom, I said, gesturing to the beautiful room around us. No, he agreed, but it's safety. And sometimes that's more important. He walked to the door, then paused. Dinner is at 8. Elena will show you to the dining room. I'd like you to join me. Is that an order? It's an invitation. His eyes met mine, and I saw something in them that made my breath catch. You can say no, but I'd prefer if you said yes. After he left, I sat in the growing darkness, listening to the sounds of the house settling around me. This was my life now. Gilded cage, dangerous protector. Invisible girl made suddenly, terrifyingly visible, and the worst part was the small, reckless voice in my head that whispered, maybe this is better than what you had before. Maybe being seen, even by a monster, was better than being invisible. Maybe I was more lost than I'd realized. I wore the burgundy dress. It had been hanging in the closet between the casual clothes and the evening gowns. Understated but elegant, the kind of thing I'd never had occasion to wear before. The fabric felt like water against my skin, cool and weightless. I left my hair down. It fell past my shoulders in waves I usually kept pinned up for work, and applied the minimal makeup I found in the bathroom drawer. Everything in its place. Everything anticipating my needs before I knew I had them. It was 7:55 when I finally forced myself to leave the room. Elena was waiting in the hallway, as if she'd known the exact moment I'd emerge. She smiled approvingly at the dress. Beautiful. He'll be pleased. I didn't wear it for him. I lied. Her smile said she knew better, but she didn't comment. She led me down the grand staircase to the first floor, through a hallway lined with art I couldn't begin to appreciate, to a dining room that took my breath away. A crystal chandelier hung over a table set for two, candles flickering in silver holders, wine glasses catching the light. Through the windows, the garden was illuminated with soft landscape lighting, turning it into something from a fairy tale. Falcone stood by the window, a glass of wine in his hand, wearing a dark suit without the tie. He turned when we entered, and his expression shifted, something crossing his face too quickly for me to read, before his usual controlled mask returned. Thank you, Elena, he said without looking away from me. She left, closing the door behind her with a soft click. You look beautiful, Falcone said simply. I wanted to deflect, to make some cutting remark about prisoners in pretty cages, but the sincerity in his voice stopped me. Thank you. He pulled out a chair for me, the one facing the garden, and waited until I sat before taking his own seat across from me. A moment later, a door I hadn't noticed opened, and staff appeared with the first course, some kind of delicate soup that smelled of herbs and cream. We ate in silence for a few minutes. The soup was exquisite, probably the best thing I'd ever tasted, which just made me more aware of how far I was from my world of burnt coffee and day-old pastries. You're angry, Falcone said finally. I'm trapped. You're safe. Same thing, from where I'm sitting. I set down my spoon, meeting his eyes. You can dress it up however you want. Protection, safety, paying your debts. But I'm still here against my will. You called me. He reminded me. You made your choice. Some choice. Run and hide forever, or become your... What? Your responsibility? Your project? My guest, he said carefully. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Guest can leave. His jaw tightened, the first sign of frustration I'd seen. You want the truth? Fine. There are 3 families in this city who would love nothing more than to see me dead. Marco and his brother were working for one of them, the Calabrese family. They used Marco's desire for revenge as a weapon, pointed him at me in a public place, hoping I'd either die or make a scene that would draw attention from the authorities. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. You were seen that night, Sophia. Not by many people, but by enough. There's a price on your head right now, $50,000 to anyone who can deliver you to Vincent Calabrese. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the table. You're lying. I don't lie. He pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, then turned it toward me. This went out yesterday. The photo on the screen was grainy but unmistakable. Me, behind the counter at Romano's, taken through the cafe window. The text below was in Italian, but I could guess its meaning from the number, $50,000. Oh God, I whispered. So yes, you're trapped, but the alternative is being dead. He put the phone away, his expression softening slightly. I know this isn't what you wanted. I know I've turned your life upside down, but I won't apologize for keeping you alive. The staff returned, clearing the soup and bringing the next course, some kind of fish with vegetables arranged like art. I stared at it, my appetite gone, my mind racing. How long? I asked quietly. How long what? How long until it's safe? Until I can go back to my life? He was quiet for a long moment, too long. I don't know. Weeks? Months? Possibly longer. I looked up at him sharply. Years? The Calabrese family doesn't forget. They don't forgive. He picked up his wine glass but didn't drink. But they can be negotiated with. I'm working on it. Working on what? My freedom? Your safety. He finally took a sip of wine. There's a difference. I wanted to throw something at him, wanted to scream, wanted to run from this beautiful dining room in this impossible situation, and somehow find my way back to my small, safe, invisible life. But that life was gone. The moment I'd thrown that coffee pot, the moment I'd saved his life, I'd stepped into his world, and there was no stepping back. Tell me about yourself, Falcone said, changing the subject with jarring casualness. What? We're going to be spending time together. I'd like to know who you are beyond the waitress who saved my life. Why? So you can have a more complete file on me? A slight smile. I already have a complete file on you. I want to hear it from you. The admission should have bothered me more than it did. What do you want to know? Whatever you want to tell me. He started eating his fish with careful precision. Where did you grow up? Do you have family? What were you before you became invisible? The questions hit something raw inside me. I picked up my own fork, needing something to do with my hands. I grew up in foster care. My mother died when I was 16. Cancer. No father in the picture. I aged out of the system at 18 and got the job at Romano's because it was the first place that would hire me without experience. I met his eyes. I became a waitress because I didn't have any other options, and I became invisible because that's how you survive when you have nothing and nobody. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. No siblings, friends. A few acquaintances, no one close. I forced myself to eat a bite of fish. It was perfectly cooked but tasted like ash. It's easier that way. People can't disappoint you if you don't let them in. That sounds lonely. Loneliness is safer than betrayal. Yes, he said quietly. It is. We ate in silence for a few minutes, but it felt different now. Less hostile, more shared. Like we'd both admitted something true and were sitting with the weight of it. My turn, I said finally. Tell me about you. What do you want to know? Everything you know about me, apparently. Where did you grow up? How did you become? I gestured vaguely, encompassing the house, the guards, the life of violence and power. This. He set down his fork, his eyes distant. I grew up in Hell's Kitchen. My father worked on the docks, drank too much, beat my mother when the mood struck him. I had 2 sisters, one older, one younger. A pause. The younger one died when I was 17. Wrong place, wrong time. A bullet meant for someone else. I'm sorry, I said softly. That's when I learned that being invisible doesn't keep you safe. It just makes you an acceptable casualty. His voice was flat, emotionless, but I could see the old pain in his eyes. So I made sure I was never invisible again. I joined a crew, learned the business, worked my way up. By the time I was 30, I was running my own operations. By 35, I controlled most of the waterfront. Now, a slight smile. Now I'm the man people whisper about in cafes. Do you regret it? The violence, the blood, every day. The admission surprised me, but regret doesn't change anything. I made my choices. I live with them. Even if it means people trying to kill you in coffee shops. Even then. His eyes met mine. Though I have to admit, I didn't expect to be saved by a waitress with good reflexes and bad survival instincts. I almost smiled. Almost. Bad survival instincts? I'm the one who survived this long by staying invisible. And I'm the one who survived by being impossible to ignore. He raised his glass in a mock toast. Maybe we're both wrong. Maybe there's a third option neither of us has considered. What option? Being visible to the right people. Invisible to everyone else. Before I could respond, a phone buzzed. Falcone pulled it from his pocket, glanced at the screen, and his expression hardened. Excuse me. He stepped away from the table, speaking in rapid Italian, his voice low and sharp. I couldn't understand the words, but I understood the tone. Something was wrong. He paced to the window, his free hand clenched at his side, every line of his body tense. When he ended the call, he didn't return to the table immediately. He stood there, staring out at the garden, his shoulders rigid. What's wrong? I asked. The Calabresi family just made a move. They hit one of my warehouses on the waterfront. 3 of my men are dead, 2 more injured. He turned to face me, and the man I saw was different from the one who'd been sharing dinner with me moments before. This was the man who'd walked into the cafe that Friday night, cold, calculating, dangerous. They're escalating, trying to draw me out. Will it work? Yes. He moved back to the table but didn't sit. I need to handle this. Elena will stay with you tonight. Don't leave the house. Don't go near the windows. I understand, I interrupted. I'll be safe. He studied me for a moment, something like surprise crossing his face. You're not afraid. I'm terrified, I corrected. But I understand the rules now. Stay invisible to everyone except you. That almost smile returned. Smart girl. He reached out, his hand hovering near my face for a moment before he seemed to think better of it and let it drop. I'll be back by morning. If anything happens, anything, Elena knows what to do. Falcone, I called as he headed for the door. He turned back. Be careful. I'm always careful. A pause. But thank you. After he left, I sat alone in that beautiful dining room, surrounded by half-eaten food and flickering candles, listening to the sounds of men gathering in the hallway, weapons being checked, engines starting in the driveway. Going to war, I realized. He was going to war because someone had dared to strike at him, and I was the reason, the spark that had ignited this conflict. Elena appeared in the doorway. Come on. Let's get you somewhere more secure. She led me back upstairs, but not to my room. Instead, we went to a study on the 2nd floor, dark wood paneling, leather chairs, bookshelves full of first editions. She locked the door behind us and went to the window, checking the street below. Is it always like this? I asked. The violence? Yes and no. She turned to face me. Mr. Falcone tries to avoid open conflict. It's bad for business, but when someone pushes, he pushes back harder. It's the only language his enemies understand. How long have you worked for him? 8 years. He saved my life once, in a way not unlike how you saved his. She settled into one of the chairs, a gun appearing in her hand from somewhere I hadn't seen. I was a cop. Good one, too. Until I started investigating the wrong people and ended up with a target on my back. The department wouldn't protect me. Too much politics. Too many people on the take. Falcone stepped in, offered me a job, protection, a life. And you took it. What choice did I have? She smiled slightly. Same choice you had. Run forever, or accept protection from a monster. Do you regret it? Every day, she said, echoing Falcone's words. But I'm alive. And in this world, that's what matters. We waited through the long hours of the night. Elena made coffee from a pot in the corner of the study. We didn't talk much. She was too alert, too focused on watching, listening. I curled up in one of the leather chairs and tried not to imagine what Falcone was doing, tried not to picture the violence, the blood, the men dying because of choices that had started with me throwing a coffee pot. Dawn was breaking when we heard the cars return. Elena moved to the window, relaxing fractionally. He's back. Is he hurt? Can't tell from here, but he's walking, so that's something. She unlocked the door, and we went downstairs. Falcone was in the entryway, his suit jacket gone, his shirt torn and stained with something dark. Blood, I realized with a jolt. His knuckles were split and raw. He was giving orders to someone on the phone, his voice steady despite his appearance. He saw me and ended the call. "You're hurt," I said, moving toward him before I could think better of it. "It's not my blood." He looked down at his shirt as if noticing it for the first time. Mostly. I reached for his hand, examining the split knuckles. "You need these cleaned. Sophia." "Don't." I looked up at him. "Don't tell me you're fine. You're bleeding and you look like you've been through hell and you're going to sit down and let me help you because that's what people do for each other." For a moment, I thought he'd argue. Then something in his expression softened. "Okay." Elena disappeared, returning moments later with a first aid kit. She helped me guide Falcone to the living room, where he sat on the couch with the kind of weariness that went bone deep. I knelt in front of him, opening the kit, my hand steadier than I expected. "This might sting," I warned, dabbing antiseptic on his knuckles. He didn't flinch, just watched me work, his eyes heavy-lidded with exhaustion. "You don't have to do this." "I know." I wrapped his knuckles with gauze, careful and precise. "But someone should take care of you. Even monsters deserve that." "Especially monsters," he murmured. "We're the ones who need it most." I looked up at him, and our eyes locked. In that moment, something shifted between us. Some wall that had been carefully maintained crumbled. I saw past the violence and the power to the man underneath, the boy from Hell's Kitchen who'd lost his sister, who'd chosen power over invisibility because it was the only way he knew to survive. And he saw me. Really saw me. Not the waitress, not the witness, not the responsibility. Just me. "Sophia," he said quietly. "Don't," I whispered, though I wasn't sure what I was asking him not to do. "Don't speak. Don't look at me like that. Don't make me feel things I shouldn't feel for a man covered in blood." "I'm sorry," he said. "For all of this, for dragging you into my world, for—" I kissed him. I didn't plan it. Didn't think about it. My body moved before my brain could object, closing the distance between us, my lips finding his. He tasted like copper and smoke and something darker I couldn't name. For a heartbeat, he froze. Then his hand came up to cup the back of my head, his fingers tangling in my hair, and he kissed me back with a hunger that stole my breath. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. "That was stupid," I said. "Yes," he agreed. "I don't even like you. I know. You're a criminal. A killer. Everything I should run from." "Yes." His thumb traced my cheekbone. "But you're not running." "No," I admitted, "I'm not." Because somewhere between the cafe and the mansion, between fear and protection, between the girl I'd been and whatever I was becoming, I'd stopped seeing him as just a monster. I'd started seeing him as a man. Flawed, violent, dangerous, but also strangely gentle with me, protective, present, seeing me in a way no one ever had before. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. The kiss changed everything. We didn't talk about it that morning. Falcone went upstairs to shower and change while I sat in the living room, my fingers touching my lips like I could still feel the ghost of him there. Elena brought me coffee and said nothing, but her knowing look said enough. I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross, and we both knew it. When Falcone returned an hour later, clean and dressed in fresh clothes, the distance between us felt both smaller and more dangerous. He sat across from me in the living room, coffee in hand, and for a long moment, we just looked at each other. "We need to talk about what happened," he said finally. "The warehouse? Or the kiss? Both." He set down his coffee. The situation with the Calabrese family is escalating faster than I anticipated. They're not just after revenge anymore. They're trying to destabilize my entire operation, using you as leverage. So what do? The "we" slipped out naturally, and I saw his expression shift. Surprise, then something warmer. I have a meeting with Vincent Calabrese tomorrow night. Neutral ground. We're going to negotiate terms. What kind of terms? The kind that end this war before more people die. He leaned forward. But I need something from you first. I need you to trust me. I barely know you. You know enough. You know I keep my promises. You know I'll do whatever it takes to protect the people in my care. His eyes held mine. You know I'd burn this city down before I let anyone hurt you. The intensity in his voice made my heart race. Why? Why do you care so much? I'm just a waitress who threw a coffee pot. No. He stood, moving to the window, his back to me. You're the woman who acted when everyone else would have frozen. You're the woman who kept her word even when she was terrified. He turned back, and the vulnerability in his expression took my breath away. You're the first person in a very long time who's looked at me and seen a man instead of a monster. I see both, I said honestly. The man and the monster. I can't pretend the violence doesn't exist. I'm not asking you to pretend. I'm asking you to understand that sometimes the only way to protect what matters is to become something terrible. He crossed back to me, kneeling so we were at eye level. My sister died because I was too weak to protect her. My mother died because I hadn't built enough power to get her away from my father. I've spent 20 years making sure I'm never that powerless again. I reached out, my hand cupping his scarred cheek, and now you're trying to protect me the same way. Yes. He turned his head, pressing a kiss to my palm, even if it means you hate me for it. I don't hate you. The admission felt like stepping off a cliff. I should. God knows I should. But I don't. His hand covered mine, holding it against his face. Sophia, after tomorrow night, if things go well, you'll have a choice. You can go back to your life. I'll make sure the Calabrese family leaves you alone. Or... He paused, his eyes searching mine. Or you can stay, not as a prisoner or a responsibility, as someone I want in my life, someone I need in my life. That's insane. We barely know each other. I've known you for a week, and I already know you better than people I've worked with for years. His thumb stroked across my knuckles. You're brave and smart, and you don't take bullshit from anyone, including me. You see through the power and the money to who I really am. Do you know how rare that is? Do you know how insane this sounds? I'm a foster kid who makes coffee for a living. You're... You. I pulled my hand away, standing, needing distance to think. Your world is violence and blood, and people trying to kill each other over territory and respect. I don't belong in that world. Maybe not. He stood too. Or maybe you belong there more than you think. Maybe being invisible for so long taught you how to see what others miss, how to survive, how to know when to act and when to hide. You're romanticizing it. I was invisible because I had no choice, not because I was learning some valuable life skill. And I became a monster because I had no choice. But here we are. He moved closer, not touching me, but close enough that I could feel his warmth. Both of us trying to survive the only ways we knew how. Both of us alone until a random Friday night in a cafe changed everything. I wanted to argue. Wanted to maintain the walls I'd built so carefully over the years. But looking at him, really looking at him, I saw the same loneliness I'd carried my whole life. The same careful distance from the world. The same fear of being hurt disguised as strength. What if the meeting tomorrow doesn't go well? I asked quietly. Then I'll do whatever I have to do to end this. Even if it means starting a war that will paint this city red. His expression hardened. But I won't let them take you from me. That's not negotiable. The possessiveness in his voice should have scared me. Instead, it sent warmth flooding through my chest. When had anyone ever fought for me? When had anyone ever considered me worth protecting at any cost? I'm not asking you to decide now, Falcone continued. I'm just asking you to consider the possibility that maybe we're not as different as you think. That maybe we both deserve something more than loneliness and survival. Before I could respond, his phone rang. He answered it, listened for a moment, then nodded. "I'll be right there." He looked at me. "I need to handle something. Will you be okay?" "I'm always okay." He smiled slightly. "That's what worries me. You're so used to being okay alone that you don't know how to let someone help you." After he left, I spent the rest of the day trying to process everything. Elena took me for a walk in the garden, still on the property, still protected, but at least outside. The autumn air was crisp and cool, and for a few hours I could almost pretend I was just a woman in a beautiful garden instead of a waitress turned witness trapped in a mob boss's mansion. That night, Falcone joined me for dinner again. We didn't talk about the meeting or the future or the kiss. Instead, he asked me about books I'd read, movies I'd loved, dreams I'd had before life had taught me to stop dreaming. And I asked him about growing up in Hell's Kitchen, about his sisters, about the moments before he became the man everyone feared. We talked until midnight, and when he walked me to my room, he kissed me again. Softer this time, gentle, like I was something precious he was afraid to break. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said against my lips, "know that meeting you was the best accident of my life, even if it came with a war, especially because it came with you." The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Falcone left early to prepare for the meeting, taking most of his men with him. Elena stayed with me, tense and alert, checking her phone every few minutes. I tried to read, to watch TV, to do anything to keep my mind occupied. Nothing worked. At 8 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "It's done. Coming home." Home. He'd called it home. An hour later, I heard the cars in the driveway. I ran downstairs, not caring if I looked desperate, not caring about anything except knowing he was alive and safe. He walked through the door looking exhausted but unharmed, and when he saw me, he smiled, a real, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. "It's over," he said. "Vincent agreed to back off. The price on your head is gone. You're safe." I should have felt relief, freedom. Instead, I felt empty. "So I can leave?" "Yes." He moved closer. "You can walk out that door right now and go back to your apartment, your job, your life. I'll have people watch over you for a few weeks to make sure Vincent keeps his word, but after that, you'll be truly free." What did you give him? To make him agree? Territory, money, a promise of peace. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear, and a guarantee that if anything happens to you, ever, by anyone, I'll assume it was him and respond accordingly. "You threaten to start a war if anyone touches me." "Yes." No hesitation, no apology. Now and always, even if you walk out that door and never look back. I stood there in the entryway of his mansion, wearing borrowed clothes, looking at a man I'd known for a week who'd somehow become essential to me. The smart choice was obvious. Take my freedom, go back to my safe, invisible life, forget this had ever happened. But I'd spent 23 years being smart, being safe, being invisible. Maybe it was time to be brave instead. "What if I don't want to leave?" I asked quietly. His eyes darkened. "Sophia, what if I want to stay? Not as a prisoner or someone you're protecting out of obligation, but as someone who chooses to be here. Chooses you." "You don't know what you're saying. My life is dangerous. There will always be threats, always be enemies. I can't promise you safety or normalcy or any of the things you deserve." "I don't want normalcy. I had normalcy. It was lonely and empty, and I was dying slowly in plain sight." I moved closer to him. "You said I have a choice now. Well, I'm making it. I choose this. I choose you." "Why?" The word came out raw, vulnerable. "Why would you choose this life? Because for the first time in my life, someone sees me. Really sees me. Not the invisible waitress, not the foster kid nobody wanted, not the girl who learned to take up as little space as possible. You see me, Falcone, all of me. The scared parts, and the brave parts, and the parts that don't make sense." I reached up, cupping his face in my hands, and somehow, impossibly, I see you too. Not the monster everyone else sees. The man underneath. He pulled me against him, his arms wrapping around me like he was afraid I'd disappear. "If you stay, I won't let you go. Not ever. You need to understand that." "Good." I pulled back enough to look at him because I'm tired of running, tired of being alone, tired of surviving instead of living. He kissed me then, and it felt like coming home to a place I'd never been before. When we finally broke apart, he was smiling, that real smile that made him look younger, less burdened. "There's something you should know," he said. "Your apartment building? I bought it last week, fixed the locks, upgraded the security, made sure the heat works. Your neighbors won't have to worry anymore." I stared at him. "You bought my building?" "I bought the whole block." He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I was trying to find ways to help without being obvious about it. "I know you value your independence." "You're insane." "Yes." He kissed my forehead. "But I'm your kind of insane now." Over the following weeks, I learned what it meant to be part of Falcone's world. Elena became my friend and protector, teaching me how to handle a gun and spot surveillance. I met his remaining family, his older sister Maria, who ran several legitimate businesses and hugged me like I was already family. I attended dinners where millions of dollars changed hands over wine and pasta, where violence was discussed as casually as the weather. I kept my job at Romano's. Falcone understood I needed something that was mine, though he did buy the cafe and give Mr. Romano the raise and vacation time he'd needed for years. My coworkers never knew that the expensive car that sometimes waited outside belonged to the man who kissed me goodbye each morning before I left for my shift. It wasn't a normal life. There were still threats, still moments when Falcone had to handle things I didn't ask about. But there was also laughter over breakfast, lazy Sunday mornings in bed, quiet evenings in the garden where he'd hold me and tell me stories about the man he used to be. 6 months after that night in the cafe, he asked me to marry him. We were in the garden, surrounded by spring flowers, and he got down on one knee with a ring that probably cost more than I'd earn in a lifetime. But what made me cry was what he said. "I was surviving before you, now I'm living. Marry me, Sophia. Choose me every day the way I choose you." I said yes. The wedding was small. His family, Elena, Mr. Romano, and a few people from the cafe, and a handful of his most trusted associates. No mob spectacle. No ostentatious display of wealth. Just 2 people who'd found each other in the darkness and decided to build something that looked like light. On our wedding night, as we stood on the balcony of our bedroom, looking out over the city that had tried to kill us both in different ways, Falcone wrapped his arms around me from behind. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. "Throwing that coffee pot? Saving my life?" I thought about the girl I'd been, invisible, lonely, surviving but not really living. Then I thought about the woman I'd become, seen, cherished, brave enough to choose happiness even when it came wrapped in danger. "No," I said, leaning back against him. "I regret nothing, not even marrying a monster." I turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd become my home. "You're not a monster. You're just a man who learned to survive in a world that tried to break him. And I'm just a woman who learned that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is let yourself be seen." He kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of promise. And as the city lights sparkled below us, I realized that invisibility had never been safety. It had been a slow death. Real safety was this, being known completely and loved anyway. Being protected not because you were weak, but because you were precious. Being seen not as a responsibility or an obligation, but as someone worth fighting for. We stayed on that balcony until dawn. 2 survivors who'd found in each other something worth more than power or safety, or all the invisibility in the world. We'd found home. And for the first time in both our lives, we weren't alone anymore.